For such a big vehicle off-road, this is doing better than I expected, to be honest with you. Quite crossed up actually. Let's turn on the diff lock and see if it helps in this case. There's a plastic bash plate which probably isn't going to protect much. Australia has yet another four-wheel drive ute to choose from in what is already a very crowded segment. This is the MG U9. It's the first four-wheel drive ute from MG, and I'm here today to find out if it is actually any good off-road. Is this a capable ute or is it more of a soft roader? And to find out more, I've brought a benchmark along of Australia's favourite four-wheel drive ute. It's actually Australia's favourite car in terms of sales volume. That is, of course, the Ford Ranger. They're going head-to-head off-road. Let's see which one is better. The newest entrant to the four-wheel drive ute segment in Australia is the MG U9, and we've got top specification here in this test. It's called Explore Pro, and it's priced from $60,990 drive away. This model gets 20-inch alloy wheels as standard kit, along with automatic LED headlights, side steps, and a tub liner. There's also a panoramic sunroof, twin 12.3-inch displays on the inside, a 360-degree camera system, and heated and ventilated front seats with massaging and memory for the driver. And don't forget, we've got leather trimming in here as well. Power for the MG U9 comes from a 2.5-litre turbocharged four-cylinder diesel engine, which makes 160 kilowatts and 520 newton meters, and that runs through a part-time four-wheel drive system and low-range transfer case with an 8-speed automatic transmission. Most importantly for this test, however, is the inclusion of locking differentials front and rear, and that is something only the Explorer Pro model gets. Others in the range only get the rear locking diff. Up against the MG in this off-road test is the Ford Ranger, Australia's most popular four-wheel drive ute, and it's actually Australia's best-selling car over the past 2 years. And we've got the mid-spec Ranger XLT in this comparison, which is priced from $63,890 plus on-road costs, when it's equipped with a 2-litre, 4-cylinder twin-turbo diesel engine. This engine makes 154 kilowatts and 500 newton meters, running through a 10-speed automatic transmission with part-time four-wheel drive, low range, and a locking rear differential. In terms of standard kit, this Ranger XLT has cloth seats with manual adjustment, leather wrapping for the steering wheel and gear shifter, and a bit more of a working vibe on the interior overall. And along with a 10.1-inch infotainment display, it's clear to see that this Ranger is not nearly as well equipped as the U9 for what is a higher asking price. There's also 17-inch alloy wheels and a tub liner, but the 360-degree camera system that we have here comes as part of a $1,750 option pack, which also includes zone lighting, some auxiliary switches, and an integrated brake controller. Historically speaking, the Ford Ranger has been one of the bigger vehicles in the segment in terms of length and wheelbase, but as those numbers show you, and as you can physically see now, there's this new breed of four-wheel drive ute coming through that's going up a size once again. This MG U9 is bigger than the Ford Ranger, and it's really getting close to something like a Ford F-150 in overall size. It's bigger in terms of length and is bigger in terms of wheelbase, and also just presence. This is a vehicle that feels its size, absolutely. Now, in terms of off-road ground clearance, you can kind of see here in terms of the front overhang, the rear overhang, that massive wheelbase. This isn't going to be the best in class in terms of ground clearance off-road. This might have some troubles in terms of approach, ramp over, and departure angles. And it's worth talking about the wheels and tires as well. We've actually got 20-inch wheels here in this trim level of MG U9. When I first saw the car, I thought they might have been 18s. Because this vehicle is so big overall, it kind of swallows up these 20s. And we've also got some Continental tires here. They're a highway tire, pretty good on-road. We'll see how they go off-road in a minute. But one really important thing to talk about is what is hiding underneath the bum of this U9, because it's an important point of difference. Let's have a look. Now, what we've got in the rear suspension of this U9 is actually an independent setup with coils, which is quite a rare thing for the four-wheel drive ute segment. The only one I can think of actually is the BYD Shark. Of course, the BYD Shark is a plug-in hybrid vehicle. This is straight turbo diesel. So theoretically, This should be better for a little bit of on-road ride compliance. Maybe off-road it won't articulate as well, but we'll find out in a minute. But one thing worth pointing out here is that this vehicle shares a lot with the LDV Terron 9, which is similar in terms of the platform, the sheet metal, the powertrain as well. But the LDV gets leaf springs with a live rear axle, which is a little bit more conventional, I suppose, for a ute. So if this rear suspension, which is fully independent, isn't your jam, look at the LDV. Now it's going to be interesting to see how this goes off-road, and for what it's worth, it all looks quite sturdy. This is a massive piece of subframe, but I also want to have a look at what it looks like underneath up the front as well, to see if this is really suitable for off-road driving. Now up the front of this U9, it's a little bit more of a regular setup, independent front suspension, and we do have some protection here. So there is a bit of steel here which protects the sump of the engine, maybe a little bit thin, and then further forward there's a plastic bash plate which probably isn't going to protect much, but that is protecting effectively the bottom of the radiator up front. But when I look back, I do see a couple of things that are a little bit more exposed. So you've got, I'm not sure actually if that is a muffler or a second DPF in this car. There is a DPF higher up just after the turbo, but that is sitting a little bit low after the wheels here. And you've also got over on this side what looks to be a fuel filter as well. If you hit that, that's made of plastic. You'd be doing pretty well to hit it, I think, but that is a catastrophic stop if you do hit it, so something to keep in mind. There's also a couple of other wires and pipes that are mostly protected, but in worst case scenarios it is possible. You see some pretty weird things happen off-road sometimes, so it's not perfect under here, but I think it's okay mostly. You'll be pretty unlucky to do some damage, but it is definitely possible. Now, for comparison's sake, I'm under the Ford Ranger, and where the MG had plastic up front as a bash plate, this has steel, which is of course going to be a little bit more durable. We've also got a little bash plate there for the engine. The transmission is open, but it's fairly high. We've also got an additional bash plate at the back here for the transfer case. Now we've also got something here, these two cross members on each side. Now they do eat into the ground clearance a little bit. They're mounted on the bottom of the chassis rails, but they do provide important protection here. I've got the fuel filter just here. It might be out of shot for you at the moment, but I'll tell you some things about it because it's actually shrouded with a bit of steel, and it's also made of metal as well. So it's better protected than what you get in the MG U9, which is quite important, I think. Still relatively accessible from a servicing point of view. I'm sure the mechanics love that, but I would prefer this setup in terms of using this car off-road. Now, before we get back into the action, just a quick note to make sure you are subscribed to Drive on YouTube and give us a thumbs up while you're there, because we're going to have more content coming out on this MG U9, every other four-wheel drive, and in fact every other new car on the Australian market, so make sure you don't miss out. Now, it's worth pointing out with this Ranger that you can get more capable variants of the vehicle than what we have here. You can get things like a Raptor, obviously. You can also get a Wildtrak X. There's also a Tremor, which is a good choice for improved off-road ability. But what we've got here is effectively the meat and potatoes of the range. Not the best seller, I think that might be a little bit higher up, but this is the regular XLT. So it's going to be a really good benchmark, I suppose, to see how this goes in comparison to the U9. Now, like I mentioned earlier, this Ranger is one of the larger vehicles in the segment in terms of overall clearance and size and length and that sort of thing. But I can tell you, after driving that MG U9, this feels almost like a hatchback in comparison. Now let's see how we go in terms of clearance. I'll drop it into this little hole here to start with. And also articulation as well. That's going to be the interesting one, because the MG U9 has independent coil sprung rear end. Now this has the more traditional leaf springs with a live axle. So I'll just drop this down in here now. Parking sensors going off. Turn those off. There's a button there, which is handy. Up we go. All good. Now I'll try out hill descent control while we are here. So this is all run through the screen, which is a little bit funky to use sometimes. I would prefer some physical buttons. That goes for the diff lock as well. We do have a rear diff lock in this model. No front diff lock though, so we'll see if that makes a difference a little bit later. But this is nice and controlled actually. pretty good. I've lifted a wheel there. I'm going to get on the brakes myself just a little bit to slow us down. But that is a pretty good system actually. This car does feel nice and stable. Easy to drive off-road. But the real challenge of course will be how we go on the uphill. Now I haven't bottomed out here anywhere yet. It's one thing I'm a little bit concerned with more with the MG because it's such a large vehicle. It's got a lot of bodywork as well, very squared off around the corners and edges. This is so far so good. Nice dry conditions here, a little bit dusty and scrabbly though. Really good benchmark test hill this one I think. Okay, we've made it to the bottom. Let's turn around and go up. All right, managed to do that in one turn. Don't know if the MG will do it. Much longer vehicle, much bigger wheelbase as well. But let's go up this hill. I've got the diff lock off. And we don't have any driving modes to choose from when we're in low range, unfortunately. So I'm just gonna start driving up at a slow, steady pace. And we'll just see how we go. Starting to get some wheel spin at the rear there already. I reckon if I just backed off slightly and hit it with a little bit more momentum. There we go, we're up. No diff lock just yet. I think it's not going to be far away though, because that is having a little bit of trouble there. So back in, I'm going to go into my screen, turn on that rear diff lock, put on some throttle. All right, we're moving forward once again. That's pretty good. Good throttle control available as well with this 2-litre 4-cylinder engine, but come to a stop there with the diff lock engaged. I'm going to come back slightly and just hit it slightly faster, which you don't always want to do. Sometimes you unfortunately have to. So back once again. Let's go forward. There we are. Now, one issue with this Ranger is that when the rear diff lock is engaged, I unfortunately lose traction control on the front. So I'm going to try something here. I'm going to turn that diff lock off and then go forward and just see what happens. Lots of throttle, lots of wheel spin. It is going forward. So the car's working pretty hard there to get up. It is getting up without the diff lock though, which is kind of counterintuitive and a bit of a shame. If they both worked together, this Ranger would undoubtedly be better off-road. But there we go. I'm going to turn that diff lock on again here. And it's just started spinning straight away the second I turned it on, which kind of proves the point, I think. So I'll turn it off, add the wheel spin in, there we go. So it does it. Doesn't necessarily do it that easy, to be honest with you. Final little rock step here. Pop in there. Quite crossed up actually. Let's turn on the diff lock and see if it helps in this case. There we are. Yep, we're up. All right. So sometimes it helps, sometimes it doesn't. You've got to sort of feel it out and see when it makes the right sense to use. All right, up we go. Do like the ride quality in this thing too over rough roads and that sort of thing. It does have a nice suppleness to it. Now it's the MG's turn. I've got to say, if I told myself 15 years ago I was going to be driving an MG Ute off-road, I would have laughed, but here we are. And I can tell you straight away that this feels like a much larger vehicle to drive. In terms of the seating position, the height, it's a much squared off body as well. I'm already running out of clearance there actually. I'm going to reverse back and just get around that rock. There's a bash plate under there that's getting a little bit of a workout already. It's not going to be as good for clearance as the Ford Ranger, and something like a Toyota Hilux is even better again from that point of view, but hopefully we can manage this car through these challenges here. We'll see how we go. sensors starting to go off there. There is a button to turn those off though, that's nice, always good to see. And I've got a pretty good 360 camera system here as well, just to help me plot my way through some of these ruts and challenges. Dropping into this first hole here. I'm a little bit worried about the front in terms of the amount of clearance and also the little rubber sort of front lip that sits down a little bit low. I don't want to damage this car, but we're doing okay so far. That's not too bad. There we are, no bottoming out there. We are good. Now, one thing I do want to try actually is the off-road cruise control. So if I go into off-road expert here on the screen, now we've got a bunch of things here. So crawl control, off-road, hill descent control. Let's give that a go and see how we are. All right, that's not too bad for the moment. A little bit fast for my liking. We'll see what happens when we go through a rut. Oh, okay, that's on the brakes there because that started to run away as soon as a wheel lifted. So probably not as sophisticated from a technology point of view, the hill descent control, as the Ranger, but this does have crawl control, so it'll actually work uphill as well. We might give that a try. Now I'm bottoming out there a little once again. The Ford didn't do that, but we're over okay. We'll keep going down this hill here. Now I'm not using that hill descent at the moment. It's just a little bit too fast for my taste. I think MG's definition of crawl and mine are a little bit different. Through the ruts, it's probably not as stable and flat feeling as the Ranger, and I would put that down to the independent rear suspension, probably just not having as much articulation available. So I'm lifting wheels a little bit more here than I was previously, but I'm not bottoming out, and to be honest with you, it's not too bad. It is a big car though. There is just a bit more weight and heft going on here to handle, so a little bit more on notice, I guess. Brakes are a little bit grabby at times, slipping around slightly, but we're down. Not as composed, definitely, as the Ranger, but I think it's okay. Not too bad. We're at the bottom, and let's see how we go. Turning around and going back up. All right, full lock there. Around this tree. Doesn't sound great, or the off-road traction control. Sounds like things are braking. It's not. It's just the ABS module. All the neurons firing off, sending commands. All right, we're not doing it in one turn like we did in the Ranger, that's for sure. So chuck a Yui, turn around. 3-point turn, and let's go up and see how we go here. So at the moment, I'll just double check. I've got the diff locks off in this car. Now you do need to, you press the diff lock button, and if the camera's up, it doesn't actually show up on the screen. So you do need to sort of look around a little bit. I've got no diff locks at the moment, but I am in rock mode. There is a bunch of different modes you can choose here. Rock, deep snow, deep mud, wade, and rock crawl actually. So there's a real mixture of different driving modes that are available in low range. Now that is different to what you get in the Ranger. Now I'm in rock. Let's start driving and let's see how we go here. You can hear that traction control going. I've got the crawl control on at the moment, so if I take my feet off the pedals, that's driving for me. It's upping the revs. Oof. I mean, it's going forward. Oh, I'm going to stop there. It's not really composed. It's really revving its head off, actually. I'm going to turn that off. I'm going to take over as the driver. Now let's go forward again. Let's see if we can get through this. Traction control is actually doing pretty well there. A little bit of gentle throttle, and I can feel the traction control doing its thing. That's actually pretty good. No diff locks once again. All right, now this is a deeper hole, so this is more of a challenge. All right, let's stop there. I'm gonna turn on rock crawl, see what difference that makes here. It's a little bit better actually. Doing a little bit better. Now, that's pretty good, but got more tricks up our sleeve here. Let's turn on. Oh no, the rear diff lock had turned on there in rock crawl mode. That's the advantage I was getting actually. That turned on automatically. But let's go now front lock and rear lock. So we are twin locked, all wheels in motion together. And I can just get on that throttle. Oh, this is easy. Wow. It just feels like a cheat code every time you use it. It just makes life so much easier off-road. You can really just give gentle throttle inputs. There's no real wheel spin to worry about. And even though we've got 20-inch wheels here and highway terrain tires, it's doing fine. A little bit of traction control still going off actually, which is interesting. No clearance issues either. That's pretty good. Wow. For such a big vehicle off-road, this is doing better than I expected, to be honest with you. It's lifting wheels, absolutely. It's not as stable inherently, but the diff locks just go a long way to fix a lot of those problems. There we go. Now, if the Ford Ranger had a front diff lock available to it as well, it would be a much improved vehicle off-road also, but it doesn't. So we are comparing stock standard for stock standard here. But the fact that this has, on top of diff locks, off-road driving modes within that low range system designated for different terrains, that is an advantage that this car has over the Ranger. So it's not as nimble, it's not as maneuverable, it doesn't feel as natural off-road maybe in a way in terms of the stability and just the way the suspension feels. But the capability, it's there. You can't argue with that. This got up that hill easier than the Ranger, mostly down to those diff locks, despite the fact that we've got a more road-oriented rear suspension here with the independent setup and coil springs. So that's impressive. Old technology in terms of diff locks, but in a new car like this, still makes a lot of sense. Well, I've got to say I'm really surprised by the performance of this MG, and it shows that old school technology like locking differentials still absolutely has its place in the off-road scene, because we've got locking diffs front and rear, and we've got a fairly sophisticated off-road traction control system compared to the Ranger. That's where the advantages come here. Obviously there's a whole nother conversation to be had around value for money, standard equipment, all of these sorts of things, but I would just hazard a little bit of a warning with this U9 in the fact that it's a big vehicle, and that does come with compromises in terms of nimbleness, maneuverability, and just the way the car feels generally. This Ranger, it's big, but it's not big in comparison to this car. So I think this still has its place in a lot of regards, but I've got to say this MG U9 as an off-road ute is a bit of a surprise. If you want to see more of this MG U9 in action, check out our other comparison against the Kia Tasman, where we go in depth on the interior, the midgate, the tailgate, and everything else that you need to know about this new MG ute for Australia.